Hello, and welcome to the inaugural podcast of Connecticut Writer. I'm Chris Gay. I'm a Connecticut writer. I'm here with my nephew. How you doing, nephew?
Good. How are you?
Today we're going to talk about music. The difference between music made in my generation and his generation, and how our generation, my generation X, our music was fantastic, and the millennial generation's music is essentially garbage. Now, my nephew here was born on this side of the millennium, and I was born on the previous side of it. But we're going to try to have a fair conversation about music today. So, what do you think about today's musicians, if you will, nephew? What is your opinion on them?
Well, I definitely don't think that they have the talent as previous musicians do, and I don't think that they put in as much effort as the musicians from your generation.
Well, then that's an excellent point. In fact, I totally agree. So when you had musicians in my generation, or even before my generation, like the Beatles, the British Invasion, even the Beatles were influenced by Buddy Holly and the Crickets. And in the '60s, I wasn't around yet, but that music influenced so much more. And the Beatles were kind of like two bands. They were the bubblegum pop band on Ed Sullivan's Show, and then they were the like a more revolutionary band, no pun intended. Oh, actually, yeah, pun intended. But they've influenced others. And then you had the other, like I grew up, I love Chicago. You had in the '70s, you had, other great bands. And then, the super groups, the Kansas, the Styx, Queen, David Bowie, the recently deceased David Bowie, the Eagles, so many, even the one-hit wonders of that era were fantastic. And even into the '80s, which was definitely a different sound. You had correctly told me before that it was like a synthesizer sound, but it was our sound, and we grew up in it. And the pop music, aside from whatever lyrics Duran Duran was singing, they were like the '80s version of Elton John. Great music, great to sing along, but when you hear the lyrics, you're like, what are they writing here? But still, fantastic music, and these bands and these bands and then the individual singers like Joan Baez and the folk singers, Joni Mitchell, they would sing about things. A lot of these bands came out of a time where they would put their passion for what was going on in the world at the time, be it the Vietnam War or anything else, and they would write really great songs that carry on to this very day. This generation's music is more like put in a bag of microwave popcorn, and while it's popping, you write 2 or 3 words on a piece of paper and then set some awful music to it and then get it out there. And these artists seem to be just prepackaged, talent free. Not all of them. You like give me a couple of bands, please, that you like from today's selection of bands.
Well, I like this band called 21 Pilots, and I also like a band called Panic at the Disco, and there's another band called My Chemical Romance that I really like.
Oh, 21 Pilots. You said there were, what, 2 in there?
Yeah.
So what happened to the other 19? Oh, all right. Well, that's a little misleading, but I have heard some of these because I know you wanted me to hear some of your music. And to be fair, I've listened to it. And I'll give you this, nephew. Some of the bands that you have chosen to listen to seem to have gotten influence from bands previous to them. And they aren't just all whatever is going on today with music. They seem to have some substance to them. And they seem to have taken their influences the way that the older bands did, from their previous generation. So I'll give you that. And I also give you credit because even being from this generation that you are, this current generation, you've like Frank Sinatra. You will listen to good classic music, and you'll give it a try, and you'll listen to it even on your own, not just when it's just playing here or what have you. And there's something to be said for that. So let me ask you something. These bands, at least those that are still with us, we've lost, as we said, Bowie. We've lost Glenn Frey of the Eagles, another fantastic group in his '60s. Earth, Wind and Fire just lost a founder in his '70s. Earth, Wind and Fire, another fantastic band. They still tour sometimes with Chicago. A lot of these bands tour and they still fill up stadiums. The Rolling Stones were filling up football stadiums. Bruce Springsteen is in his 60s and he's still touring to huge crowds. Chicago still tours. All these great McCartney and Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr still perform. Probably George Harrison and John Lennon would be if they were still with us. So, and these are 30, 40, sometimes even 50 years after these bands first debuted. And today, they're still resonating with fans of their era and the younger generations, which technically then I would be a part of. Do you think that some or all of your contemporary musicians that your generation listen to will have that same effect and draw 30, 40, 50 years from now if these guys, these Justin Biebers, Justin Timberlakes, Beyonce's, or whoever are still touring?
Well, I think that some of them will still be touring in the future, but I don't think that a lot of them will. And the reason for that is because, actually, there's two reasons. One of them is that they don't put a lot of effort into their music, like we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
And another one is that, music style changes a lot. And I think that it changed a lot throughout time. And I think that the combination of those two is not good. And I don't think it'll work out for them. But I definitely do think that some bands will be, because they put in effort now. So
and we've discussed some bridge bands, if you will. You and I both like the Fray music.
Mm-hmm.
The Fray is still a little bit, after me, but it's more of my generation than yours, and you enjoy their music. And I'm sure there are others that, that would maybe, 90s bands. You mentioned grunge bands to me when we were talking before. So I agree. I don't really see a lot, but there's got to be some. There's still some talent today. In however they produce this music, like I said, they're usually putting these people together, or putting this stuff together and just getting it out there. Not the same when we would sit there and listen to it on vinyl records, which were these discs you would put on a player and then a needle on the disc and it would spin at a certain speed, and 45s would then be smaller versions of these. And then we had these audio cassettes that you would put in the cassette player, and you could even record off them and even re-record off them. The technology was fantastic. And don't get me started on 8-tracks. Those things were fantastic. But today, I guess, you had the CDs, and they were only here for, seems like a blink of an eye. And now you have the MP3 and all this stuff that more about, certainly, than I do, technology-wise. So that's one good thing I will say is about today's technology, at least. You can hear anything you want, and you can hear it anywhere you want. I mean, someday I'm going to tell you about the Sony Walkman and how great that was, where you could, if you go to a gym now, you can hear any one of thousands of songs. Where before you just had to have an AM or FM radio receiver, and you either get music or you'd get talk, and you just had to hope that was what there was, and there were commercials. And it's such a different time now. It's just amazing. If you saw, like, when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, what you had to listen to, or what you had to listen to on. But be that as it may, like we said, there's going to be some groups today, that'll be okay. And I'll come across new songs that I like from today, just not many. And maybe I'm just being nostalgic, like many of our generations. Well, maybe you'll be nostalgic for this era, although music-wise, I I doubt it. So anyway, I want to thank you for coming on.
No problem.
This is the inaugural episode of Connecticut Writer. I'm Connecticut Writer Chris Gay. My website is Chris J. Gay. Please feel free to visit that and see the books that I have there. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.